Welcome to the American Reformer Podcast, hosted by Josh Abbotoy and Timon, Cline. Our mission is to promote a vigorous Christian approach to the cultural challenges of our day, rooted in the rich tradition of Protestant social and political thought.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the American Reformer Podcast. Usual host here, Timon, Cline, Editor-in-Chief of American Reformer. And I'm joined in the studio today by a guest, Patrick Casey. Patrick, I've wanted to have you on for a while because you provide excellent commentary on your own show, which I do tune into frequently. You have great guests, and then also you're a great follow, you're a great Twitter follow for that commentary as well. All around good guy. We saw each other this year at NatCon. So I wanted to get you on, and I think the audience is going to enjoy it, our conversation. But Patrick, briefly introduce yourself to the audience for those that are not aware of you and don't follow you already.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on, Mr. Cline. It was a pleasure meeting you and kind of the some of the American Reformer extended universe at NatCon. But you asked who I am. So I have a podcast, weekly podcast, Restoring Order. I write for a number of publications, Chronicles Magazine most often. I've written for Blaze, the Federalist, the American Conservative. As you referenced, I do post on Twitter very often. I think that's my favorite medium of all of these. You can reach the most people if you just have like a thought or a take that you want to get out there. Maybe something that's going to get under, it's going to piss a lot of people off. It's better to tweet it rather than have it buried in a 2-hour podcast or something. But the podcasts are good. Long form articles are good. They're different mediums they have their pros and cons. So yeah, I've been at this for a while. I would describe my approach or my perspective as moderate paleoconservative. That's the term that I use. But yeah, I consider myself an American nationalist, and I generally just like using the right-wing descriptor. I think just kind of generally being right-wing and maybe not being too focused on which specific flavor of right-wing ideology one adheres to. I think there's some merit to that.
Yes, indeed. And we had, I'll direct the listeners, we had Paul Gottfried on a few episodes back. So if you need the primer on if you need the primer on everything, that was a long conversation. It was a great one with Paul Gottfried. But on paleoconservatism, go to that episode, and Paul will get you up to speed. And if you need a history of the American right in general, forever, go get up to speed there as well. In any case, what I wanted to talk to you about today, because this is something you've talked about recently in various mediums, is what we're going to frame is like how to be on the right in an effective way, how to be a plan truster in the midst of our present regime, and what the right should be focused on to be the most productive according to like the boundaries of the present coalition, I think. So there's been this is constant. It's not just the past few weeks. Since Trump has taken office for a second time, this happened in its own way during the first term. There seems to be a constant stream of distractions, sort of ginned up or fabricated distractions on the right. You can trace them. There's major ones, there's minor ones. You can trace them through Twitter kind of news cycles. There's always something that's sort of going on that seems to be like the shiny object that everyone attaches themselves to for a couple weeks, and then it moves on to the next thing. So what we want to talk about is how to be focused for the actual, at least ostensible goals of this present coalition that we have. And one of the things you were commenting on recently at time of recording was, whether or not the right should be constantly talking about and obsessed with Israel generally, like one way or another. Whatever your position is on Israel, should this be the leading topic of discussion on the right? So talk to us a little bit about how we should think about that issue or adjacent issues, while we have the reins of the administration right now.
Well, Israel appears to be most people's favorite topic. So naturally, of course, that's a good place to start here. Look, I've been into online or dissident rights stuff for about a decade, and I made my first Twitter account when in late 2015. Previously, I wasn't involved. I wasn't super aware of this stuff, like the Twitter scene or, just paleocon stuff. But I found Poll, the 4chan board, in 2012, and there's all sorts of outlandish stuff on there I certainly wouldn't sign off on. But I've been aware of like fringe, far right, however you want to refer to this, outer right. Some people say thought, ideas, figures for at least a decade. So there's no take, however hateful or extreme. There's no factoid that will surprise me, that will lead me to reconsider my views on these topics. Now, I do have an ongoing process of considering my own views, and that doesn't mean my views aren't changing, but there's no, I'll have people in my replies like, yeah, bet you didn't know about, the Hebrew immigrant aid society, right? HIAS. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, you seriously think that I've never heard of this organization before? So that's just a way to preface this by saying, like, I think most people that are really into the Israel stuff now have gotten really into the Israel stuff since October 7th. Mm-hmm. So I kind of see them as, we'll say newbies to this. There's another word that, I don't know which podcast platform this is on, but new Fs, one might say. Yeah. But I see this as people that are it's like a new thing. It's not the same. You could say that like the kind of the Jew obsession stuff it has a lot of similarities wherever it pops up. But yesterday, and ever since I've been critical of MTG, this whole thing with Trump that's totally cynical. She's mad that Trump told her not to run for Senate or governor because he sent her a poll and said, like, you're just not going to win. And she had done stuff to piss him off. Otherwise, she, has been on this extremely cynical, self-serving tangent where she's acting like, oh, I just wanted to go after the pedophiles, but Trump didn't want me. It's totally BS. But I've had the people upset with my takes on this, pointing the obvious out. These people all have like their bios. They call me like a GOP chill who's getting paid $7,000 per post by the state of Israel. Well, I look at their bios, and you had these sorts of people in 2016 that were around, the people that went beyond the reasonable critiques of U.S. Israel policy, of Jewish organizations. I mean, all of that stuff is fair game, but the people that it's like every tweet is about Jews. Well, these people, it's not that every tweet is about Jews. It's just like every political tweet is about Jews. Everything else is about like the NFL or the NBA or something. I think a lot of normies got one-shotted, so to speak, by anti-Semitic, and I use that term in a very conservative definition, not just throwing that around. People saying like the Jews are all evil. Well, I don't know if there's another term that is applicable to that than that. But basically, I think what's happened is since October 7th, there's a new media environment. Especially, there's far less censorship thanks to Elon Musk buying Twitter, which will be forever grateful for, even if I've got some critiques of how the site is run. And also, B, after Trump won, I think Facebook and Instagram in particular changed their algorithm to stop suppressing right-wing stuff. Some people are a little conspiratorial and think that they are trying to boost the dumbest, most conspiratorial and lowest IQ right-wing stuff, because I'm hearing anecdotes. People are, they're seeing Candace, they're seeing, people's like moms, people's, they're like normie coworkers who previously never expressed any political views, maybe had some negative things to say about Trump. Okay, well, now these people think that the Jews are literally running everything, which, there's a conversation to be had about Jewish representation. But I think as anyone listening to a highbrow podcast like this is aware, you need to have quite a bit of nuance to reach the correct level of understanding of these sorts of things. Just because Jews are like 30% of high profile attorneys doesn't mean like they're running everything, right? These sorts of things. It's easy for a normie who's not familiar with this stuff to just, again, to get one-shotted by some like basic facts. So that's kind of a long-winded way of framing things, but I think that we just are in a very different media environment than we've been in the past. And you have a mass of low IQ, normie anti-Semitism / anti-Zionism. And because it's low IQ and normie, these are people that couldn't probably define what the term paleocon is. They have no understanding of right-wing ideas or figures. And as a result of that, these people, their worldviews stem from like podcast clips. They're probably too low high time preference to watch the actual full Joe Rogan episode, but they'll get the clip. So yeah, that's basically where we are. So these people are not thinking tactically, and that's what I try to do. Is I try to introduce nuance and strategy to say, hey, if you want to win on, assuming these people have like other issues they care about winning on other than like owning the Jews, which
unclear.
yeah, exactly. Which isn't really a policy platform. You could propose platforms. You could create a policy platform that is geared around owning the Jews. But I think it's a very emotional one that's driven by, it's rooted in sentiment. It's just kind of the idea. Well, what's the goal? The goal is to complain about Jews on social media, and maybe people have more specific things in mind. I'll just leave it at that, though. But that's kind of the situation we're at. And what I think really needs to be emphasized is that this stuff is not, while there are valid critiques of Israel and Jewish organizations, absolutely. These people are wrong about a lot. They don't know what the right really is. And as a result of that, they're just constantly lashing out emotionally at things and people that they shouldn't be lashing out at, like Trump.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think the, of course, then, what feeds this in its own way. And I say this all the time. I'm like if you are, I don't know how old the Zoomers are, Zoomers and like younger millennials, and you grew up in like an evangelical context, there was, in its own way, an obsession with Israel, especially if you were in evangelical sort of dispensationalist context. Sure. Oh, yeah. And so it's perfectly natural in my mind for what does rebellion look like? But you have to really rebel against your parents. You have to be in your an adverse way, obsessed with the same thing they're obsessed with, but now you hate it, right? Or now you critique it. And so it's like this double, Israel obsession going both ways. And we've seen this, in some ways play out regularly since October 7th, which is, what I would say you can call them like the neocon old guard generally, and there's different flavors of that. But, you see it with someone like Ted Cruz or Mike Pence, who are going to make this also like a theological, spiritual analysis, at least on the back end. And so this in turn like feeds it, right? Because they present this sort of irrational approach or assessment of the relationship with Israel. And so then the people who are like the newly minted normie, Israel obsessies are like, see, this is confirmation bias. It's this is completely irrational. Something else is going on. And it's like, well, there could just be people that also have really dumb normie takes on the other side. And you just have these low IQ normies battling it out in public in front of all of us, back and forth. So it's got, it's this weird thing. And I do see it as by and large, a total distraction, right? From what else we should be doing. So I mean, how do you see this playing out, in the near term? I mean, is there any way, or what would be the way to sort of settle this down so that, we can table it for other interests, at least momentarily?
So the problem here is that this sort of hysteria is driven by influencers who don't have any incentive to calm things down or direct things in a more strategic direction. These influencers are, depending on who we're talking about, are driven by resentment against Trump / the right. They're driven by, maybe a desire to own Mark Levin, screw every other consideration. And these are people that I think do, in some cases, maybe honestly actually misunderstand or over sort of exaggerate the extent to which and the way in which Israel and pro-Israel advocacy can be counterproductive to right-wing goals. So one thing I notice a lot of people do is they will tie everything back to Israel. They'll say, I'm saying, well, we should be focusing on immigration, because if we continue to have decades of replacement migration, where the historic demographic core of America, which is white Americans, or even more specifically, Anglo-Americans, and I think it's just kind of Anglo-Americans and white Americans who assimilated to that, which is, where my Irish ancestors came in before Ellis Island, for the record, but pre-Civil War. But still, no, that's if we're being realistic, it's not just white; it's specific type of white people. But even the founders and most Americans up until very recently, and I still think a lot of Americans now understood that, there was sort of a European core to America. We had immigration laws throughout our history that were totally conscious of the demographics of the country, right? So if you replace the people, you replace the nation. If we were to just, it's very basic stuff, but just to, bolster my argument, if you were to wake up one day in Ireland, instead of there being Irish people there, everyone on Ireland the night before was flown out, and you flew in Russians or something. Okay. That would be a huge debacle, of course, having that sort of replacement take place, overnight. But even if the Russians were able to get it together and run Ireland or something, it just wouldn't be Ireland at the end of the day. If you went there, and what you would see in terms of the nation's institutions, the cultural output would be something very different. I'm not saying it would necessarily be bad. I mean, Russians, I'm not one of these cringe pro-Russia shills on Twitter, but, you can say that Russians have contributed to world civilization, at the very least in literature, of course. But that's the important thing to keep in mind with America is, that's happening here. It's not happening overnight, and it's not really happening with Russians as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, rather. So it's the third world demographic transformation of the West. It's not just happening in America. It's that's the single biggest issue, because that is the issue from which there will be no recovery if that's not stopped, right? There's not a lot of Buddhism happening in Afghanistan. And the reason why is because the Buddhists were kicked out of Afghanistan by Muslims. And there are so many examples of this, where you look at a country today and it's not the same country it was 1,000 years ago. Why? Because of demographic change. So when it comes to, even if Israel were to get us involved in another forever war, I would be the first to speak out against that. That still wouldn't that would still probably be something that we could recover from. If we did if we did nation building in Iran, it would be disastrous. Any president who got us into that would be remembered as a terrible president. I wouldn't vote for them again. But that's the sort of thing that can be recovered from, not replacement migration.
We've recovered from a lot of them already.
yeah, exactly. And they're devastating. We don't want them to happen. But okay, so the people that are obsessed with Israel have to tie everything back. They say it's, well, you care a lot about immigration. Well, it's the Jews/Israel. And then again, that's when they bring up the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. And it's well, I don't like this organization. Of course, it's terrible. But what percentage of migration to the West is caused by hires?
Yeah.
Is it even 1%? I hate to say it, but the Catholic Church is one of the biggest promoters as far as ethnic or religious organizations. You can look at Lutheran churches. I'm sure other Protestant churches are involved in this. And then you just have the government, regardless of, I would say regardless of who's running it. Trump's doing a good job on things now, but you have a lot of entities. And so boiling it all down to the Jews, actually, some people might think that they're making a tactful, there are lots of Jews that are against this stuff. 35% of American Jews voted for the candidate promising mass deportations. We can get into the mass deportations if you want. We're in the early stages of them. Depending on the count, hundreds of thousands of illegals have been deported, close to over 2 million, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, have self-deported. And it's, and the first crop of new ICE agents hasn't even hit the ground. So there are good things happening. And American Jews voted for that. Now, did they have their own reasons was that the main reason that every one of those 35% of American Jewish voters voted for Trump? No, I'm sure they were concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism in Israel and whatever else. But that's the nature of coalitional politics. That's the nature of politics in general. That's a critique I have of a lot of these people that just want to make everything about criticizing Israel and Jews, Tucker included. I don't, is the goal to just get all of those Jewish people to vote Democrat, to give their money to Democrats? Maybe they think they could carve out a Republican Party that's less beholden to pro-Israel concerns. I don't know, but I do know that a lot of the people that, that the kind of this anti-Zionist Avengers that's forming, like MTG and Thomas Massey, these people are not good on immigration. MTG has been, but you see her walking it back as she's and counter-signaling Trump's deportations. And previously she counter-signaled H-1B restrictions, but she kind of introduced this bill, again, very cynically, I think last week to after, she was already on the outs with Trump to try to outflank him from the right. Again, to call it cynical is to be too charitable. So the people are reducing everything down to Israel and the Jews. It's not a nuanced or accurate understanding of things. It's totally possible to say that Jews lean left in America. They're an influential group. Okay. But there are too many non-Jews involved in leftism to make it exclusively a Jewish thing. And there are also Jewish conservatives and people who like Jews and find the Jew obsession stuff off-putting, like evangelicals. Although I have some disagreements with I definitely do not share their worldview when it comes to Israel or Jewish people. So I'm a pragmatist through and through, and I think that the sort of formula or approach that this JQ or Israel obsessive crowd is going for is, I don't hate Jewish people, okay, but I am primarily looking at it through like strategic terms. It's like, how do we get another Trump? How do we get Vance? Okay, I don't see this stuff as working, and I do again see people getting really into it and weakening their own positions on immigration. It doesn't mean all of them do, but like when you're trying to build a squad that's like anyone who's against Israel, it's end up that these people want to work with Democrats. They say, oh, we should form a new party with like Americans and Democrats who, hate the oligarchy and don't like Israel. And it's just like, okay, we're not doing this.
Yeah. I mean, right. We're trying to cut sentiment out of this conversation, to think about this tactically. I mean, one thing that, pushing on this issue constantly. I mean, again, October 7th happens, or, when we're going to bomb Iran, fine. Maybe for that moment, it's a time to talk about some of this a little more directly. That's fine. But it's a constant stream, no matter what's actually going on in Washington or on the world stage. It's a topic of conversation for a large swath of at least the online right, which does drive conversation. Twitter does matter in this way. Journalists are lazy. This is where they pay attention to, how things are defined, and then it's sort of it cycles in and out. And so, I mean, one thing that's been distracting about all this, I think, is when you don't want to pressure people. Like we want Vance to win. I do. I want Vance to win at 28. And people are clearly already thinking about this. And there's always going to be, in a coalition, especially one that's new and that's this big, there's going to be some level of like low burn infighting almost constantly, right? This is just part of the deal. There's going to be jockeying for control of the direction of the coalition. So when you identify where those potential pain points are, where those fractures can emerge, you, generally speaking, want to de-emphasize those. You want to reduce the influence of disagreement on the direction of the coalition, right? So that you keep it together and maintain its force and power. And this is one of those things. I mean, there are people in the coalition that have wildly different views and disagreements on Israel. And so in my opinion, it should only be brought up or discussed really when it's absolutely necessary for our coalition to maintain the coalition or to maintain its coherence. And this is, so it's really bad, for instance, when this is, when a round of this sort of blows up, that you force someone like JD Vance to weigh in at all, right? Because then he's potentially alienating members of the coalition or at least annoying them, which diminishes your chances of success 3 years from now, right? For the same coalition to show up in the way it did for Trump and to back the candidate that we want. And you've seen this happen over the past few weeks. And so for like the foot soldiers on the ground, I always, the strategic move is don't make your leadership do anything. Don't put them in a situation where they have to kind of choose a side on something that's highly divisive within your own coalition. It's not about the left. It's, it's fine. It's not about the general public or whatever, but like
Right.
the sort of lower leaders and the foot soldiers of your movement, you don't want to force the generals to have to weigh in on a conflict and like choose a side. And this seems to be the issue that does this. I mean, is there anything that's sort of parallel or that's similarly divisive on the new right now?
Sorry, could you rephrase that?
Is there anything? I mean, I don't. I'm just sort of emphasizing like this is the issue that does that. Israel is the issue that has the potential to seriously fracture the MAGA coalition. I don't see another issue where there's sufficient disagreement going in that can get people to respond in such an emotional way, an unthinking way.
Yeah, there was some Antifa source or website that, and this was reported on in conservative media, that specifically said use Israel. It might have been Epstein stuff, but it was at the very least Israel stuff to kind of stir division on the right. Mm-hmm. Now, I think whatever Antifa collective that published this statement, or this might have been something that leaked, is probably responsible for like less than a fraction of a percentage of what we're seeing. I'm not saying that this is like Antifa is doing all of this, but the fact that Antifa or left-wing committed left-wing activists are talking about this means they understand it. It's not just us on the right viewing how divisive this stuff is. People on the left are doing it too, and I think that's why the media is promoting some of these people. Mm-hmm. This is why you have the Democrats calling on Trump to the biggest advocates for releasing the Epstein files are, it's like Gavin Newsom, AOC, every lame Democrat congressional representative, pundit. Dude, Epstein was like coolest. He was the closest with Democrats. You had these leaked emails that were released this week, and it's like, yeah, this guy's like a resistance lib. He was saying, this is, we got to stop Trump. He's dangerous. He's a bad guy. Okay. If you were to, if everyone in Jeff Epstein's orbit was having sex with kids, which for the record, I don't think is the case, then it would be primarily a Democrat thing. Okay. Well, Democrats don't seem too worried about it. Also, Democrats controlled the government for the last 4 years, minus well, I guess most of this year has gone by, but yeah, it's like, come on, man. So Democrats understand that this is the perfect DNC op. They understand that this is a great wedge issue because prior to October 7th, there wasn't really a big one. There was a broad consensus on MAGA stuff, and even the people who weren't big on Israel, there weren't as many of them pre-October 7th. They weren't as central figures in the coalition, and they didn't have as large of audiences as they do now. So it's the perfect way. Yeah, it's the perfect way to do this. I would differentiate between like the reasonable critiques of Israel. They're in good faith. They're within the spirit of wanting to move the ball down the field, wanting the right to win. And those, you can make those when it's necessary. But look, we had the 12-day war. We had all of the Gaza war. And there are things Israel did since October 7th that I haven't been big on. Defending themselves against jihadis is not one of them. I'm not going to go into all of it, but yeah, you can point to stuff and say, yeah, I don't think Netanyahu is fulfilling his obligations as the junior partner in this partnership quite well. You could look at him bombing Syria when the United States is very clear that we want there to be stability there. Jelani's, he's no angel, but we want there to be stability in Syria. That's good for preventing future waves of migration. It's also good for remigration. lot of Syrians in Europe and, maybe in America. Yeah, send these people back. Hey, you got a functioning central government now. The civil war is over. Okay. So, but those are valid critiques. And I actually haven't heard really any of those from like the really anti-Israel crowd. Instead, they're just crying about, a genocide that's taken place. I don't think it's really genocide. Also, I don't think buying into lib notions of genocide is really, instructive. They're saying that Jews are the real racists. Tucker Carlson says stuff like this, not explicitly that, but says stuff like this in his newsletters. And they're acting like World War III is either ongoing, we're in the middle of a forever war. I have people in my reply still saying we're at war with Iran. So I think it's telling that people need to lie about and distort the reality of Israel and the wars Israel is engaged in the Middle East in order to justify this anti-Trump position. Trump is so bad. He's such a Zionist. The threat of World War III is so great that you can't support him. You have to, just complain about Trump, say that he's Jewish, say that anyone who's supporting him is Jewish all the time. No, it's ridiculous. But again, to a lot of people, this is just entertainment. So it's a way to vent. These guys are sports fans. It's just kind of a sports mentality. You're the opposite. Your team is the Goyim. The other team, they're the Jews, and everyone's just got to cheer against them. It's very idiotic. And I say that as someone who's not like a hardline pro-Israel guy. Look, someone like Ted Cruz, when he talks about Israel, it does seem really weird to me. Now, I'm fine being in a coalition with people who have that view of Israel. And I would also include pro-Israel Jews who have their own connection, which I understand and would have if I were Jewish to Israel, I'm sure. I'm fine with being in a coalition with these people as long as they're good on the domestic issues that I care about, right? That's the same standard that I apply to people regardless of their position on Israel. And as long as we actually can agree, there shouldn't be like boots on the ground, and whatever involvement we have in the Middle East should be minimal. The bombing that we did on the Natanz and Fordham and other, it might have just been those two. It's been a little while. But on the nuclear enrichment facilities in Iran, I wasn't big on it. I don't think that we permanently ended. People acted like, oh, we ended Iran's nuclear facility. No, we didn't. That was kind of beyond. I think we did set it back. Okay. But it just raised, I've seen people say we kicked the can down the road for a few years. Okay, so we're going to have to do this all over again in a few years. I don't like that. But when it comes to Israel, like taking care of business, fighting Hamas, Hezbollah, bombing Iran, who cares, dude? As long as it's not, an actual forever war, like the idea that matters more than crushing the left, combating anti-white discrimination, mass deportations, doing something to limit the amount of legal immigration that we get every year. The idea that like, oh no, let's talk about Rafah all day. It's absurd. It's absurd. And you had people like Martyrmaid and Dave Smith saying that Trump was worse than George W. Bush, because at least George W. Bush didn't let Israel bomb Iran. Okay. Well, I actually think that 12 days of Israel leveling Tehran and other parts of the country is not anywhere near in the same level of disaster as the global war on terror, which claimed thousands of American lives, hundreds of thousands of innocent lives from other people in the Middle East, and cost us trillions of dollars. Really just was a huge to call it a misstep would be an understatement, right? It was really just a generational disaster in terms of foreign policy.
Yeah.
And of course, the domestic policies that resulted from that. You had the Patriot Act, and we actually got more pro-Muslim, pro-diversity stuff. It was just a total disaster. So, the idea that like people have to lie about the Trump and like what's actually happening in Israel to build this narrative. And I think the reasonable Israel critiques oftentimes, you don't hear those from these people. So it's not to say Tucker and these others are, don't on occasion say something, critical of Israel that I might agree with, like the junior partner thing or wanting less foreign aid. But I think that if the people that are just trying to make this a podcast thing, there's the incentive to make it as grandiose and as hysterical as possible. And for those of us who, we just want to see the country move in a better direction, want the right to win, want the right to crush the left, and want a less interventionist foreign policy.
Mhm.
This sort of emphasis on Israel and the distorted perspective that they provide on Israel is just totally counterproductive.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure there's varying motivations for wanting a less interventionist foreign policy that people on the right have. But one of those is that, at least for me, is that, the forever wars in a generally interventionist posture where you're constantly embroiled in conflicts abroad, not for any sort of discernible interest on your own part, but doing the nation building stuff. So you're very interested in foreign domestic policy. This is my motivation for disliking that and wanting to be done with that is that it's a distraction from your own domestic sphere. It's your distraction from your own domestic well-being. And you're, disproportionately the people who die on the sand dunes are, like my, my Appalachian kin or my Midwestern kin, that like the people no one cares about, right? The forgotten. So these are the people that die. I don't want them going off and having to die for nothing with no one can articulate a real American interest. And we're spending all of our resources on shoring up the domestic front of random countries. I want that to be applied here. Right. So it seems like it's like we can't handle, or we were so brainwashed, over the past 20 years is we have to have some kind of foreign distraction. We can't seem to function without it. So when we don't have one, we invent one. Even the right is doing this. Right. It's like we have to constantly be obsessed with something going on outside our borders. I'm like, I thought this was the whole point, is that we, we're going to pause that and we're going to fixate and focus on what's going on here. And it seems like people just they don't actually want that. It's like they're bored with that. And so we have to have something going on all the time. So I find it incredibly counterproductive. And someone asked me not that long ago, like, and I thought we were all in agreement on this. Like, what's the one thing that if Trump failed on it, you would say this was all for nothing? The past 10 years are for nothing. And my only answer is, if there is not meaningful change on immigration, meaningful progress, then it's a failure. Yeah. Everything else, I just do not care, because nothing's going to be perfect. And so it seemed, I thought that was like the general agreement. I thought in one way or another, we were all about immigration and the demographic problems. I thought we were, but that seems to not be the case, or at least people don't act like it. And maybe it is as simple as what you say of like, well, that's not great for business all the time. It's not great for your influence. It's whether you're someone on the Hill trying to make a name for themselves or you're online. And I think you pointing out that a lot of these accounts, they are just sports accounts. And so this should be interpreted as like a sporting activity. I think it's completely how people operate. But, one thing maybe that drives this, and you talked about this the other day, is that, I don't know if people were really locked in for the long haul and what it's going to take on immigration. I think they thought that there was going to be some kind of massive noticeable change, like immediately, like 100 million people gone, day 2 in office or something like this. And so it seems like they're losing focus and kind of determination on this. And it's causing them to, not just get depressed, but to start criticizing Trump as if nothing's happening. But you were pointing out that this is not at all how our political enemies see it, right? Like the left they are not happy with what's happening. They think there is real change happening. So talk to me a little bit about how we actually evaluate, our success and what I think is the central issue of the coalition, or should be.
Yeah, there was this New York Times article complaining about that I used to craft the tweet in question that went through. I got the title right here. Nope. Turns out I don't. Okay. So it was a different article. It was complaining about Trump's reduction in immigration. That Trump is successfully, there's another New York Times article. Immigrant population in the US drops for the first time in decades. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we are undergoing already, before the BBB funding has fully kicked in, right? The first crop of new ICE agents isn't even going to hit the ground until January. And that's what I was told by someone in the admin a month or two ago. And so that could change. These things take forever. One reason it's taken so long is, this is the single biggest increase in immigration enforcement funding in U.S. history. So I'm being told by people that the guy who managed to secure that, despite, the grandstanding from base Thomas Massey and like Rand Paul and whatever, managed to secure it despite them, is not serious about the deportations. Okay. If Trump secured that level of funding for immigration enforcement in his first term, that would have been like this, the sky, parted, the clouds parted, and the good Lord is just like, all right, you're welcome. And I do think Trump is a providential figure. But look, at the end of the day, Trump is actually succeeding at carrying out mass deportations, and we haven't fully seen we don't really know what the yearly rate is going to look like. I'm open to critiques that there are things that he could be doing better. There was a lot of stuff back and forth over the course of this year on worksite enforcement, and I don't know the full. Last I heard was they're going to deport people and then offer temporary visas for some of these people to come back. That's it's whatever. It's not ideal, but that is a lot different than giving these people a pathway to citizenship. And, it's also different than not deporting them. If you're deporting these people, getting these people out and saying, okay, there's a legal process to, all right, it's not ideal, but then that gets into okay, how many people are we talking? Are we actually going to be sure that they're not going to overstay their visas? Are we actually sure that there are not Americans who can do this? And those are the considerations that come into place. But yeah, if they're just saying don't deport people on work sites, so I don't really know the extent of it. I doubt that work site enforcement is stopped entirely. I'm not 100% sure. Regardless, according to the administration so far, right before the new ICE 10K, new ICE agents kick in, before a lot of that other funding, like 170, 180 billion kicks in, we've already kicked out, 500,000. And that's deportation. Self-deportations, something like 2.2 million. A little harder to determine that, but that study from the Center for Immigration Studies did account for the common response is, these are just people that went underground, and that's why it looks like the foreign-born population decreased. The Center for Immigration, some of that could be true, but the Center for Immigration Studies report, those guys are pretty solid. They're good faith analysts. They're not afraid to criticize the Republican administration, and they're very smart. This is like a high IQ operation. So I believe it or not, the report accounts for that. So there are the occasional liberal who will, reporter that will write something and say Trump's actually not doing enough on immigration. Most of the coverage is not that. But I've looked into some of these reports. There was an NPR interview with a guy, I forget his name, and he was claiming, the administration has deported into 300,000, not the 500,000. Okay, if the administration were intentionally lying about that would be a problem, and I would be upset. I'm not saying that they are, but I'm saying that even according to the liberals who decide that instead of complaining about all of the the deportations Trump is doing, that they're going to just say that he's failing at his own agenda. Okay, but even these people are saying hundreds of thousands of people have been deported. Also, compared to what Democrats do is they count returns as removals. Returns is when you're at the border and the Border Patrol just turns someone away. Okay, that's not really a deportation. When you're talking about deportation, you're talking about interior enforcement. You're going inside the country, not at the border, inside. We do want people turned away at the border, of course, but inside the country and arresting people. That's really what matters. And it's easy to count, Obama and Biden did this probably in different ways, but Biden had all of these, he had really high, not really high deportations, but the deportations that he had, it's he let in 10 million illegals. Okay, some of that, on top of that, were turned away, and those are counted as deportation. That's not a sign, even if he was doing 1 million of those per year, but 10 million ended up making it in overall. That doesn't matter, right? So Trump has locked down the border, and his first few months in office basically ended the border crisis. We are at historic lows for southern border crossing.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of people, they're not giving him credit for this. And I think a lot of people are just operating in bad faith. They just want to complain. So Trump ended the border crisis. He got the single greatest increase in immigration enforcement funding in American history. And now we're seeing the fruits of that. But we will not fully see the fruits of that until I think this time next year. Doesn't mean you can't critique stuff. Doesn't mean, okay, but you just got to keep, like, if you're saying that the mass deportations, Trump has abandoned them when, like, he secured all this money for, like, new ICE agents. It really is ridiculous. Now we could get into the H-1B stuff, the Chinese students, if you want. I think you had these freakouts this year, or pardon me, this year, but yeah, this past week, and they weren't really they in fact were not based on any changes in policy, and the extent to which, like, the 600K, that's just existing policy. Okay, I would like to see fewer Chinese exchange students and fewer Chinese immigrants in the country overall. Sure. But the idea that, like, oh, Trump betrayed us by, if he had just not said anything, would they have said that the continuance of that policy was a betrayal? No, they wouldn't have. Trump misspoke on H-1Bs. He was clearly referring to a very specific situation in which Korean workers were brought over to train American workers to do the jobs. Right? It's not stealing jobs, to train American workers how to create batteries at this Hyundai plant. Now, if the Hyundai plant was abusing the visa system and these people were in fact here illegally, then yeah, that's a problem. But I don't have a problem if there are people with expertise abroad who are coming here to train American workers. Mm-hmm. Not the opposite, not the H-1B stuff where it's the Americans training their replacements. No, they're coming over here for 6 months, training Americans. They're going back. That's good because that's contributing to American job creation and that's bringing specialized technical knowledge to America. So that's what Trump was getting at there. He clearly wasn't referring to H-1Bs. People were right to kind of speak out against it, but as usual, people just took it way too far.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does. He needs to get I don't see why people don't give him the credit for what has happened. I mean, this is a monumental task, like, that's been, before MAGA, for the past 10 years. This is what we set up to. No one, I didn't think, thought it was going to be easy or happen overnight. And it's like any progress is not enough. And I don't think and it's not just the matter of, like, logistics and tracking people down and all this sort of thing, but it's the sheer like scope of, we've talked about, Biden let in 10 million, or maybe is only 9. If you take their numbers, let's count the people they were turning away as deportations. Fine. 9 million people. And just to put a dent in that, I mean, it's going to take some time, and you're battling Washington to do it. So I don't understand why people thought this was going to be easy or expect more than this. I agree that there should be, critique along the way, trying to nudge the administration or keep it keep them going in the right direction, sort of give feedback from the coalition. But this general sort of depression that's, like, descended on the right, as if, nothing's ever going to, and I just have had the perspective. I think Michael Anton talked about this a couple years ago. It's like, 50 million is better than 60 million. I don't know what we're going to be able to accomplish, but the goal is to try to slow down this demographic change to see what we can do to stabilize our domestic front. That's the goal. And it's not going to be perfect, but any reduction is good. And so to have a historic decline in migration since the 60s, since basically we changed our immigration policy to facilitate demographic replacement, I think is a win. No one else has ever done it before. So I don't understand, like, what needs to be, maybe there's nothing, but, like, what needs to be inserted or sort of injected into the right to, revive their sort of productivity in this way, because right now it's highly unproductive.
Sure. Well, I mean, the challenge is just to carve out a smart corner of the right, essentially. I think you guys are doing good work. There's our sort of scene is, I would describe it as a kind of a constellation, a decentralized network of people who generally get who the good guys and the bad guys are on the right. You understand that on the one hand, you have the sort of pre-Trump GOP status quo that is really just longing to return. And I think that some of the, like, idiots on the right who are promoting extreme, ridiculous stuff are kind of playing the heel, so to speak, and are, by playing the villain, are emboldening the gatekeepers, people like James Lindsay. Someone like Lindsay, this guy claims to support Trump. This is a guy for whom like NatCon stuff is woke right. Right. It's a lot of his daily crusade on Twitter is denouncing real or perceived anti-Semites. But someone like Yoram Hazani, who is an American citizen, but he lives in Israel, so Israeli nationalist, is like that guy. That guy's the problem too. Okay, so that should be very clear. That's not me saying that. That's what James Lindsay's saying. So this is someone who views like NatCon stuff as too far. That's verboten. That's outside the it should be outside the permitted boundaries of the right. I hope people really take to heart what's at stake here is like regardless of what you agree with when it comes to Tucker and the even more odious people in his extended universe, I hope you're seeing what's happening. Like this is emboldening gatekeeping efforts. I'm not saying, I think the cat's kind of out of the bag in terms of like, the stuff that we care about, immigration restriction, not having to fully worry about speaking about taboo topics within, the parameters established by the left. But it's important, I think, for the kind of people who listen to your podcast, smart, probably disproportionately politically active people, even if they don't have like a political job, they're, probably have a political network, the kind of person that would go to a conference of sorts. And it's just important to like carve out our space where we recognize the issues with like the people on the fringes, so to speak, and also with, the stuff that's happening, sort of the GOP gatekeeping efforts, because neither of those really present like a good way forward. And I think that, a lot of people are into like the JQ stuff because it's entertaining, gives them a sense of identity. It's a very emotional experience. People like getting really worked up online. And again, that's just in front of a screen. I think that's part of the sports thing. I don't mean to knock on sports fans too often. I'm a moderate when it comes to sports. If people want to watch football or something, I'm not going to judge. I'm not into that stuff. But I do think that, the online right has this tendency to just say that, people can't go out to bars and you shouldn't watch football and you can't do normal things. You just have to kind of sit in your room and listen to Gregorian chants all day and it's, we kind of can't
people
lose sight
should do
with
normal things. We need them doing more normal things.
You can't, lose sight of, lose connection to the average, like red-blooded American man, at that point. But there are people at the very least shouldn't be like maybe too into sports. And, but if that's like your biggest interest and then you get into anti-Semitism, it's like, I don't have to actually respect your opinions.
No, yes. The point is that the politics is not sports. It's not. So as long as you can keep these distinct, you can watch, plenty of sports ball and you'll be fine. That's totally fine. Yeah. Just don't transfer those sports skills into your political commentary. That's advisable. What the right, I mean, part of this too is what the new right is going to look like is still developing. I mean, these are still growing pain stages. I think people need to appreciate that as well. So it's like, this is still, seems like we've been doing it for a long time, but it's not been that long, right? We're still figuring it out, and trying to figure out how, to actually win and continue to win. So these things, people need to maintain their focus on what the primary goals of like the coalition are now. And I don't think that means, as you've said, I don't think that means you can't talk about other issues or provide critiques and commentary on those things. But there needs to be some sense of proportionality, especially when you're sort of trotting it out publicly for like the world to see. Right? There needs to be a much better discipline on the right of developing certain positions, in-house before you decide to show everyone how the sausage is made, like publicly, which is
right.
Plenty of guys that have been, around for a long time have pointed this out as like for a long time, online was the only place that was there for anyone on the right to talk about anything. and you had there were like no stakes. It was just talking about it. But now, there are stakes in play. And so doing this constantly publicly and like, having these feuds that everyone seems to enjoy as it's entertaining, is not the right thing to do anymore, if it ever was, but it's certainly not now. It's not productive. So, Patrick, I know we're coming up on time here and you've been generous with it. So thanks for coming on to talk about this stuff a bit. I think it's helpful to keep these things in mind and try to orient us constantly, because there's lots of just natural distractions, and from, our enemies like to encourage these as well. So we need to be aware of that. Where can people follow more of your commentary, catch your show, so on and so forth, so they know where to go? We'll drop it in the show notes as well. Thank you,
Timon. I've enjoyed our discussion here. So people can go to @RestoreOrderUSA on Twitter. They can also go to patrickcasey.com. That's where I post the Substack, and Restoring Orders it's on Spotify. I post it on Twitter as well. But if people make their way to my Twitter, I'm sure they'll be able to find everything else.
Excellent. Thank you so much again for your time, and thank you, audience, for tuning in, and subscribe and all that. Till next time, God bless.
You can find American Reformer on the internet at www.americanreformer.org or on x.com, formerly Twitter, @AMReformer. Don't forget to like, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Please consider supporting us today by making a tax-deductible donation through our secure online donation portal at AmericanReformer.org. That's AmericanReformer.org.